Next team we're talking about, another SEC team. We only got one more after this SEC team, just telling you guys right now. But there's a loaded conference next year, as it always is. The Florida Gators for next year. Dolan, what do we like about them going into 2025?
Well, I think they're better in the trenches now than really we thought they would be going into last season, right? And you talk about a guy, one of your favorite players in the country, Jake Slaughter, the starting center, right? Yep. Tyreek Sapp, one of the highest graded edge rushers in the country, I believe. You still have Desmond Watson, big Desmond Watson in there on the inside too.
Caleb Banks is nasty.
Caleb Banks is really good. The way this defensive line came on late last year, I think especially in that LSU game when they just harassed Garrett Nussmeier, really shows you the potential of that group. And then, look, the obvious one here is the potential, the ceiling of DJ Lagway, right? We saw it at times last year. We also saw some recklessness and inaccuracy at times. And the combination of what they could do with, what he could do with Trey Wilson, J. Michael Sturdivant coming over from UCLA, right? Aiden Mizell. I think you've got the Gators are one. And it's a loaded SEC. Jaden Ball, running back, too, is a guy we need to mention. In a loaded SEC, the Gators have as much potential, the dangerous word as always there, as any of those top teams in the SEC this year, right? And it obviously rides with Lagway and his ability, the number one high school quarterback in the country coming out when he did. I think that's what you're looking at. It's going to be, for me, about him making the in-between throws, right? I talk the same way about former Gator Anthony Richardson and just making those throws that move the chains, right? Playing with consistent footwork and consistent accuracy. If he can do that, he's got maybe the most arm talent of any quarterback in the country. There's obviously a ceiling here. The other thing to me is this finally going to be the year where we see, just like with LSU, when is their secondary going to play better?
Yeah.
Because that's really been the huge problem, too, with the Gators is way too many explosive plays given up on defense. And, again, you don't want to get in these big shootouts every week. I love their defensive line. I like what's going on in the front seven. But the secondary and then the consistency of Lagway for an entire season are the two biggest questions. But there is huge potential here. But there's also a scenario, and I think they've got a brutal schedule again, where 8-5 last year, that could also be around the same range where they are this year. It's going to depend on how they develop Lagway and how they develop the secondary.
Exactly, and I think Florida was a team, I remember we looked at the schedule for them, and then we said there's no way Billy Napier keeps his job after this year. Because we said, okay, it's probably minimum make a bowl game. And we're like, there's no way they're making a bowl game with how brutal that schedule is. And they started rattling off wins, man. They beat Ole Miss, right? They had some big-time wins at the end of the year, and we're like, okay, wait a minute. There's something there with Florida. So I think the potential of Florida is really, really intriguing. As you mentioned, it's all about DJ Lagway. This guy was one of the highest-graded quarterbacks in America last year on deep throws. He has one of the highest grades on deep throws, one of the lowest grades in America on all other throws. From 0 to 10 yards and 10 to 19 yards, he's one of the lowest graded quarterbacks in America. But from 20-plus yards, he was one of the highest graded quarterbacks in America. So he's an electric player, obviously arm talent for days, maybe the most talented quarterback in the country, but it's just about kind of developing a little bit more. Then you mentioned Jake Slaughter is the best interior O-lineman coming back in college football. I thought he deserved the Remington Award last year. He was dominant, again, against top competition. He played some D tackles that are going to go in the first round and second round of the NFL draft, and he was still one of the highest graded centers in the country. So I love Jake Slaughter. Just getting him back for another year was massive for Florida. Trey Wilson's a really good receiver. J. Michael Sturdivant's a really talented player as well. And then you mentioned the defense, man. I'm going through my rankings right now for D tackles and edges. I had Tyreek Sapp in the top 5 of my edges. He's a really, really good player. Caleb Banks was an honorable mention for my D tackles. I'm telling you guys right now, this guy is going to be like a day 1 or day 2 pick probably next year's draft. Like, he has just absurd. He's a little inconsistent right now, which is why he didn't make my list of the top 10. But if I'm making a list for the top 10 for the draft, he would be in that list, man, because he's got ridiculous length at D tackle and just some reps that he has on tape, man. It's like, dude, this guy is a freak. So I love those two, but you're right. The secondary didn't really bring in many guys in the transfer portal. You lose Jason Marshall Jr. from the secondary as well. I like Jordan Castell at safety. I like Devin Moore at cornerback, but that's going to be a big part of the team and the big question mark for the team. But man, if DJ Lagway can become the superstar that he showed signs of he could become last year. I mean, still, listen, he had a 73 passing grade as a true freshman in the SEC. That's really good, right? So there is obviously development needed for him, but there's no denying he might be the most physically talented quarterback in the country.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that works in Florida's favor, as it does with several other SEC teams that we've mentioned here, is the ability to lose probably 2 games and still have a lot of breathing room. You look at this schedule now, you can sit here on one hand and go, man, that's a really rough schedule again for them. Yeah. And on the other, you go, if you go 10-2 with this schedule, you're in business. You're going to be in the top 12. I look at LSU's on here, Miami, Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and then, of course, the Florida State game at the end of it all. But you go 10-2 with that schedule, they're going to find a way to put you in the top 12. Yeah. And if we think
even
they're
9-3, they'll be like one of those teams like South Carolina or Alabama, or like 9-3 with that schedule though.
And I look at these games and I go, they beat LSU last year.
Yep.
They beat Ole Miss last year. Miami's going to take probably some sort of a step back head-to-head, along with the Gators taking a step forward. They were tied with Georgia without Lagway with, 6-7 minutes remaining in that game? I mean, they played a really good game with Georgia. You just look at the momentum the Gators had coming down the stretch last year. If Lagway's healthy and everything's fine, I know even lately there's been rumors of some sort of mystery shoulder issue with him, but you hope that doesn't carry into the season. They have enough talent to make this happen. They just have to go out there and execute both Lagway. And again, I think the secondary is going to be the biggest point of scrutiny. It has been for me the last 2 years. Yeah. They just have to find a way to not give up so many explosive plays. Keep yourself in the game. Let this talented offense work.
Absolutely. So Florida Gators led by DJ Lagway on the offense, and of course that loaded defensive line with Tyreek Sapp and Caleb Banks on the defense. Should be a talented team going to next year, and should be in the mix of all those SEC teams for the college football playoff. Hey, thanks for watching another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel.
Also, subscribe to PFF Plus at subscribe.pff.com for all of the same data and grades that we use in our show, plus fantasy tools, betting tools, and our mock draft simulator.